In today's episode, we discuss why Sustainable Development Goals are relevant for businesses today and how they can activate around them. We explore which businesses are doing them well and what we can learn from them. Let's make a social impact. Hi everyone, I'm Carl. Welcome to the Social Impact Show, where CSR professionals get the latest strategies and tips to help them scale and grow their CSR and goodness programs. Now remember, if this is your first time on this channel and you want to get the latest strategies from the experts, hit the subscription button below, hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. So today I've got two special guests. My first guest, who is my co-host, is Janelle Saint-Omer, who is the Regional Vice President here at Benevity, as well as Sue Stevenson, who is the co-founder of Impact 2030.
Thanks, Carl. It's great to be here with everybody again, and hello out there to our audience. Sue, it is amazing to have you back with us. Thank you so much for joining us to talk all about the SDGs. Why are the Sustainable Development Goals relevant for business? What's really their impact for companies?
So I'd say there's two things. Why is business important for the Sustainable Development Goals, but also why the Sustainable Development Goals important specifically to business? If we think about the first part, that first question, though, the role that the private sector plays with the goals as the biggest as the employer on the planet, 90% of both formal and informal work is connected to the private sector. So you think the impact on communities with that sort of the economic flow, the flow of taxes, the flow of product, the employment of people, the taxes coming into communities, the goals could not be achieved if it wasn't for the role that the private sector plays in the economy. But I think specifically to your question around why are the goals important for business, it's because they provide the opportunity, they provide that blueprint to help companies determine what role are they going to play as part of their purpose of operating, what role can they play to help advance the health and safety of the planet. And the goals, the 17 goals, 169 targets that sit underneath them, are a tremendous blueprint. I think, certainly when they were adopted in 2015, I was heading corporate responsibility at the Ritz-Carlton, and I remember at the time we looked at these goals, and as an organization that had employees around the world, 40 different countries. Here was a roadmap for our CSR strategy that enabled us to identify issue areas that were core to the business, that were applicable, whether we were in China or whether we were in India or whether we were in the United States or Canada. And that is the beauty of these goals. They are, you can't take any of these, whether it's clean water and sanitation, good health, responsible consumption, life on land, they're all applicable in the communities that where we live and work.
And I think to that point, that's really the focus for so many companies, to really ensure that the communities where their employees live and where their companies are actually operating are thriving, because obviously if communities are thriving, then companies are thriving. So what would be a reason why a business would not be interested or wanting to have anything to do with adopting these goals?
What I've seen is that there is, the 17 goals, 169 targets, these goals that are, the language is written for governments, the goals, if you dig into the goals, targets are written for, and the indicators are written for governments. How do you decide, a company might say, well, we're in tech industry or we're in banking, so what's clean water and sanitation to do with us? So I think companies, I won't say get confused, but I think sometimes I have seen people get confused because they'll think we've got to adopt all 17 goals. And what I've seen is the companies that have been most effective have been the ones that have really dug in deep to analyze the goals and determined which targets play a specific role as part of their business strategy, not just their ESG and CSR and social impact strategies, but as far as the business. And how do you then integrate that to ensure that it's part of the sort of the broad spectrum of your business strategy, the employee life cycle, your customers, your supply chain, etc. your growth strategy as an organization, both economically and geographically. So I think companies have, rather than trying to retrofit or lay it over and tie a bow around and say, this is our SDG bow around what we're already doing, they've actually dug in deeply. And there are many, many outstanding examples from not just multinationals who maybe have the funding and the resources to do that type of complex digging in deeply, but smaller companies, regional companies. I've seen just tremendous examples. So I think it's, for those that haven't, it's probably just feeling that it's overwhelming. In reality, I truly believe that integrating the goals it makes life easier, because you've got a clearer path. It also enables that commonality of communication between companies, between sectors, between businesses, because we're all speaking the same type of language. So yes, I think I might have gone off on a tangent there, Janelle. I'm sorry if
That is okay. That is okay. But I think you just mentioned one key point, that we're all going to be speaking the same language. And to me, the language that we've seen over the last, probably I'd say 5 years, that's becoming more and more top of mind is ESG, or environmental, social, and governance. So, how does the Sustainable Development Goals align to a company's environmental, social, and governance goals?
Great question. So, and I get this question a lot. So the Sustainable Development Goals are the global roadmap. The goals apply to countries, communities, or individual citizens. I mean, they're broadly applicable. ESG is business focused. So ESG is, the evolution, as we've seen, from CSR, social impact, and now, ESG is the company's way of focusing in on, it's bringing in what was, traditionally sustainability, and then you had social impact, or CSR, and then you've got sort of the governance side, the business ethics, etc. It's pulling all of that together. And the goals support that. So they work in harmony, I think is the way. I think the beauty of, just going, since you brought up ESG, I think the exciting evolution there, as companies start to talk about ESG and not siloing sustainability and social impact, is that integration is now finding its way into integrated reporting, where companies, instead of doing let's put out our annual report, the important one that goes out to all investors, and then we'll have our CSR report on the side, completely independent, now seeing that pulled in to being part of that integrated reporting. And I think, secondly, I'm sure most people on the call are familiar with Larry Fink's annual letter that comes out. So, the CEO of BlackRock. So, the man whose organization has the funds of many of the publicly traded companies, sends out a letter annually in January to CEOs to share his words of wisdom. It's an eagerly anticipated letter, and he is really pushing the envelope around these issue areas of ESG and the importance of companies focusing in on the social issues that are out in the communities, and on sustainability. So the reason that's good, and for anybody that's not read one of Larry Fink's letters, you can just Google Larry Fink CEO letter, put 2021, and you'll get the most current one. But it means that this conversation is happening at the C-suite. So all of this reinforces the importance but helps the social impact executives, the sustainability executives, because the C-suite are recognizing this is important stuff. We've got to get this integrated. This isn't just a nice to do. This isn't just something we can bolt onto the side of the way we operate. But this is indeed something that has to be part of our core purpose and values as an organization.
Absolutely. And I would actually say that, with everything that we've seen over the last almost 2 years, CSR as on the whole is really having a moment. And I think with everything that Larry Fink has said and how he's pushed businesses and companies, CSR has kind of been thrust to the forefront, thrust into the limelight. And if you think about the S in ESG, kind of the social piece, that to me is really where the SDGs align, right? Because that's a lot of those pieces around social, it has to be activated through employees and all of those things. So a lot of that comes into the social piece in the ESG. So I think there's a very clear link that a lot of companies can make, and it really helps that their C-suite are thinking about ESG. All companies are thinking about ESG. So it's almost like for CSR practitioners, now is really the time to push the envelope as far as we can to really help to drive these activities forward.
Yes, definitely. Sort of seizing the moment. I would say I do see that the goals sort of overlay well, but yes, you're absolutely right. For the CSR executives, which I'm sure is the majority of the people listening in to the podcast, seize the day. This is as an old CSR. Individual who, years ago, it's exciting to see the profession really be at this point in time. I think we all know collectively that people in this work can move mountains, and I think now is our opportunity to step forward.
So Sue, how are companies activating around SDG goals? Like, how are they integrating it into their business?
Everyone is different, of course, but we see it in many different ways. If I speak to the companies that I've collaborated with through Impact 2030, our focus as an organization was on integrating it into human capital strategy for to ensure that pro bono, skills-based, hands-on volunteer service. It was totally integrated with the Sustainable Development Goals, so that was the focus of the organization. But for many of the companies that became part of Impact 2030 back in 2015, we've been able to watch how they broadly adopted the goals into much more broadly than they have. And there's actually some tremendous examples. We're launching a report for Global Goals Week, Transforming Lives and Communities, which really features 19 companies and the work that they have done in that regard. But I think companies are taking different approaches. So some are maybe integrating it into their employee engagement, employee volunteering. Some are adopting it broadly across their CSR or their ESG strategy. I get very excited when a company publishes their annual report. I always want to go dive in to see, where they're referencing the Sustainable Development Goals, and companies are I'm definitely seeing many more examples of that now, where they're showing how their actions are making an impact, where they are as a company trying to move the needle. I think one of the things that people should remember is that there can be the risk of saying at a very superficial level, well, we are focused on Sustainable Development Goal number 5, gender equality, and that's where we're going to focus. What we are seeing, though, companies, as they drill down into the targets, they look at where specifically under that goal are we focusing our efforts? So for Sustainable Development Goal, for example, number 5, I'm going to look at here so I get them correct. Target 5.1 is about ending discrimination against women. 5.2 is about ending violence and exploitation. 5.5, ensuring full participation in leadership. 5B, promoting and empowering women through technology. So by digging underneath the goals is the ability to see where a company, by putting its resources, its time, maybe its philanthropic dollars, can help move that along. And then other companies, have done a tremendous job of aligning their company name, the mission, vision, purpose, externally with customers, with the goal. And I've got a couple here. Nike with SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. Lego, SDG 4, ensuring quality education and lifelong learning. JetBlue, all about climate action, SDG 13. Discovery Channel, Life Below Water, Sustainable Development Goal 14. So in their communications externally with their customers, they've got this wraparound message, and then are showing how the work that they're doing to make an impact there. Hilton Hotels launched Travel with Purpose around Sustainable Development Goal 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. So I'm sure there's people listening to this saying, gosh, she didn't mention my company's example. There are many, many examples of companies that are doing a tremendous job of that alignment, and proudly talking of how they as an organization are channeling in and focusing in on specific issue areas.
So what are the challenges some of these companies are facing? And I guess more so, you talked about how some of the governments, like especially the United States, like that change in administration had an impact. How does those kind of external factors affect a business's ability to meet some of those or activate under those SDG goals?
So, I think it does come back to Sustainable Development Goal 17, partnerships for the goals. Without question, a national government's commitment to the goals, local government's commitment, community commitment, community education around the goals, business support, all sort of interplays into a commitment to advancing the goals forward. I think companies have a lot of focus areas, and of course the pandemic has further expanded where attention is going. But I think if you have got national or local, if it isn't on the radar screen, there is the risk that it will drop off the front burner. Is that an old-fashioned expression? I guess it is. But I'm confident, even as we think about the Business Roundtable, this is prior to the pandemic, it was I believe 2018, where the Business Roundtable, so, the US major companies came together and the CEOs signed a pledge that they would be focused around, purpose, speaking to the issue areas in the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are issue areas, but I think for companies, if their C-suite is committed, they can make tremendous inroads with the goals, and tremendous standing forward, being the right side of history as leaders. Drill down into how can we integrate the goals broadly across the business and not just cherry pick goals and say that that's superficially what we're doing, because that isn't sustainable.
And so further to that, and you mentioned, quite a few companies previously. So for the companies from the perspective that are doing it really well, what do you think makes their approach unique? Like, why are they succeeding at it? Is it because of the endorsement that they have from the top? Is it, to your point, because it's integrated across the business? Is it because they've really looked at, each one of the goals and kind of the indicators under each of them and figured out how to apply? Like, what makes their approach unique and so successful?
So I think it is, for those that have been most successful, in my belief and what I'm reading, in discussions with others, is taking it from being a social impact focus to truly being a business focus. So I've referenced a lot of North American companies. So I'll give a shout out to two that, as an example, Iberdrola, which is headquartered out of Madrid, which is an energy company with a large footprint across Latin America and Europe. has done a tremendous job, starting back in 2016, of integrating the Sustainable Development Goals into their business strategy and pulling it through the business so effectively. And they really wanted to mobilize. They have 35,000 employees around the world, wanted to ensure and really felt that they were a force for good and that they needed to have the employees on board with this. So they have not missed a beat even through the pandemic. They have a campaign, pardon me, they have a campaign called SDGs and Me. And it's integrated from when an employee comes on board, through orientation, through communications, through evaluations, through their volunteer service, through their roles within the organization, be them leadership or as an associate. The SDGs is integrated into every part. It's integrated into their communication with their customers, in the work that they do as they evaluate their supply chain. Clearly, it's driven from the top. Their senior leadership have very much endorsed this, but holistically within the organization, there is just a tremendous focus. And there's many other organizations that have seen that, but I really believe it's one, obviously, you have to have that C-suite support and endorsement, but then pulling it through all the way through the organization. And we all know the power of employee engagement. This is what employees want to see. This is what not just this generation, even old folks like me, want to see companies that are truly committed to doing the right thing. They want to be aligned with it. They want to be proud. They want to purchase from organizations that are doing the right things. So this ability to be connected to something that is this global roadmap, this global blueprint, directionally is definitely the right direction for companies to go.
Awesome. So Sue, if anybody wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do?
Through LinkedIn. So Sue Stevenson with a PH, and I will be happy to respond. Look forward to any outreach.
This is part 2 of our 3-part discussion on Sustainable Development Goals with Sue Stevenson. Check out part 3 here as we discuss if these goals are actually achievable by 2030 and what companies should be thinking about as it relates to SDGs and their broader corporate social responsibility programs. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in our next episode.